John, you mentioned a good point about having new blood in there. I'm a big advocate of having brand new coaches step in, see what they have. That's why I think the Suns shouldn't go the Doc Rivers route. I'm a big Jordy Fernandez, Kenny Young guy.
Respect.
I don't like Frank Vogel either.
Assistant for the Celtics.
The 76ers signed Nick Nurse.
Well, here comes Joel Embiid playing 50 minutes.
Now, Joel Embiid, he played a big part in this signing, the connection with Daryl Morey, because Daryl Morey hired Nick Nurse as the G League head coach for the Rockets G League team at the time. Now, my question is, are we sure that 5 years from now, we're not going to look at Nick Nurse in a similar light to how we look at Doc Rivers, a head coach that keeps on getting jobs due to one championship run with a team?
I don't think that's fair.
The blown leads for Doc is just
Nick
such
Nurse
an
hasn't blown a
outlier.
lead.
Nick
You
Nurse
look- you-
has never had the talent that Doc Rivers has been surrounded with his
overachieved
entire
over
career.
Kawhi.
Kawhi Leonard would be the best player Doc Rivers would ever has ever coached.
It stops there.
It stops there, but with the Clippers, their main problem was injuries
He coached him. Am I wrong?
They blew a 3-1 lead and they were healthy.
I think
against the Rockets.
Coached him.
Wait. Are you talking about PG in them?
No, I'm talking about the first thing.
Oh, sorry. They just weren't that
Didn't
good.
Doc Rivers
Oh,
coach
it's
Kawhi? Am
probably-
I tweaking?
He did coach Kawhi, but Kawhi, they were in the bubble that year. He
They
coached him for
blew
1
a
year.
3-1 lead. How are we defending this?
Well, for one, and if you look back
You
at
talk about the
that,
Chris Paul team.
if you look back at at that bubble team, the Clippers' entire team voted to not play
Yeah, they didn't
anymore.
want to go.
Paul
Oh my
George openly,
Yes.
what Paul
Gotta-
George,
at that point, you
Riv,
gotta
you're a Paul
play,
George
bro.
guy.
He
Didn't
wasn't.
Paul George openly say he was
What
checked
are
out
we
of that
doing?
series?
Yeah.
He was checked out of the bubble. The
How
same
do
way.
you go up 3-1 if you're checked out?
I'm not making that excuse, but he didn't play good enough. When they went up.
Throw it
3-1.
away.
The
Stop this
playoff,
argument.
He didn't
wasn't
play
good
well at all.
He didn't play well at all.
I look at
And they
Doc
still went up
Rivers,
3-1.
and he's blown leads before, sure. He has.
That's what he does.
Great.
And I'm not calling Doc
That's
a
true.
better coach than Nick Nurse.
I hope you're not.
But when I look at Nick Nurse, I look at somebody that is going to live off his one championship
Best
run for a
player has
long
been
time.
Pascal
That's- yeah,
Siakam.
they have
It's
His
a
aggressive
dookie take.
is
It's a dookie
let me
take.
talk, because I want to finish my sentiment about Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse has an aggressive defensive scheme that can be both good and bad. They were one of the best teams in NBA history last season in getting steals. That same defensive scheme, they faced the Sixers in the playoffs in 2022. The Sixers torched them in the playoffs offensively.
They almost came back
That
from a 3-0
they,
deficit.
they
and
lost.
forced the game
They
7.
lost. They didn't force a game 7. What are
They
you talking
almost
about?
did.
They lost.
Don't you think
Six.
the Sixers
They
were a better
lost.
team?
The Sixers, but they torched them offensively. The Raptors did not have an answer for them for their offense at all.
I mean, the guy.
Don't you
didn't
think
have
they
any
had to go
parts
get
to
steals because
compete.
they never had a rim protected. They don't have
And
nobody in the
also,
back
you
line.
have the Raptors, who Nick Nurse is consistently playing his stars heavy minutes. Pascal and Fred VanVleet have both been top 5 minutes per game in the last 2 seasons. Now, you want to attribute that to, well, there's not much depth on the team. That speaks to Nick Nurse's lack of player development.
Yeah.
And
Isn't roster
And
construction too?
No, Joel's got a good point. Continue.
it attributes to the lack of player development. If
That's a
you
little
think
bit of both. I
if
feel
you
like.
think that Nick Nurse is going to Philadelphia and the depth is going to be much better, you're absolutely wrong. The depth on Philadelphia does not exist. They're probably going to lose James Harden because I don't think James Harden is a Nick Nurse type of player. I think that he's not going to come back. So now you have Maxey, Embiid, Tobias on an expiring deal, PJ Tucker, who's 38 years old, and you don't have much depth. You have DeAnthony Melton, Niang is a free agent, Paul Reed's also a free agent. Players that were pivotal to their team's depth this past season. And, as much as shit that Doc Rivers gets, in 24 seasons as a head coach, he's made the playoffs 19 times. He's only missed the playoffs 5 times. Nick Nurse in 5 seasons in Toronto has missed it twice already. And I understand you might attribute that to a lack of talent, but I was told before the season that their top 5 star lineup had a case to be in top 5. I was told that they was going to be better than this past season.
Oh, come on,
The Toronto Raptors, as mid as they are,
All right.
as mid as they are, I don't think the Sixers have much of a ceiling to get significantly better, especially when Nick Nurse coming in does not help Joel Embiid become that guy in the playoffs in the fourth quarter. You can talk about Doc Rivers blown leads all you want.
Man, and you talk
Game
about
7,
player development like Pascal Siakam doesn't exist.
That was Adrian Griffin who developed him. He worked with him closely.
But we're gonna pretend like that
you
Nick
will
Nurse
go
isn't the
to-
head coach either. Come on.
The assistant coaches are working with the players more closely than the head coach.
Yes,
I
that's
feel like
true.
that happens not a lot, but I feel like that happens, and that's okay. I mean, Steve Kerr is not one who's works with his players all the time and developing either. He has Kenny.
He's
Atkinson
not credited for developing Steph though, or Clay or
no,
Trey.
but I'm saying he even with the young guys, he doesn't just because a coach doesn't work with those young players don't mean we have to knock him. Now we talking about Nick Nurse versus Doc Rivers. Let's just be honest with the situation. After Kawhi left, they were still with that roster with a lot of depth, and they went to the second round. They took the Celtics to 7 games.
They went
It was
53-19.
Yeah, they
that
won.
season.
They had a great regular season, and then after
Doc
that,
Rivers has overachieved with not underwhelming rosters,
but he's also
before.
underachieved with
Every
stacked,
single
talented
time.
rosters. Nick Nurse has never, after Kawhi, he's never had a championship roster.
And
This roster, they had Otto Porter and Malachi Flynn and Delano Banton on the bench.
The 2019 championship run, Kawhi hits one of the clutchest shots
Yes.
ever in Game 7
You need luck
history.
sometimes.
The major adjustment they made when they were down 0-2 to the Bucks was
Yeah.
putting Kawhi on Giannis.
Mhm.
It wasn't a major adjustment by Nick Nurse. And in the finals, they faced an injured Warriors team who they played a boxing one on. So
God,
Nick
why are we
Nurse
minimizing this?
Nick Nurse is an out of the
I'm tired
box
of hearing
coach.
this.
He does try different things, but that Warriors team was hobbled. If they were healthy, the Raptors don't stand a chance against
Obviously.
You
them.
mentioned development, right?
Even if
You
Klay
mentioned
Thompson
development.
stays healthy, they might
Siakam,
not even win.
Fred,
Even if
Fred
you
VanVleet,
even
OG
if you want to
Anunoby.
say that, they still went to the finals.
Bullshit,
Yeah, they
bro.
still went to the
That's the
finals.
opportunity.
What do you want him to not go to the finals? What are we talking about here? You want him to lose to a bad Warriors team?
I'm not saying you have to lose, but that's the one when you look at since then. What has he done that's made you
We
say,
just
you know
told
what?
you.
Nurse is one of the best coaches in the league.
What
He's
team
not.
after that? What team after that Kawhi team warrants? Like, did you expect Nick Nurse to do it? Like, did you expect him to win a chip
Do we
at
do
any
we have
time? Make it up the
expectations for a
first round,
Raptors
second
team?
round.
We did not have
These
expectations.
the Raptors teams aren't that good.
Is Pascal Siakam a top 25 player?
He's definitely top 25, top 30.
And then
Top 20?
And then the drop off after that
Is he
is
top 20?
He's not top 20, but
So
What
you're-
we
so
can
you're
do-
so you're gonna
It's a
so you're
mid-roster
so you're
match.
gonna credit
24th best
you're
player.
gonna credit Nick Nurse for taking the team to the playoffs in his second season after they lost Kawhi. They still had they still
won
have a lot
50
of depth.
games.
They did win 50 games. They had a lot of depth on that team as
No
well.
star.
They
No
could have won
star.
60 games that year.
Doc Rivers in 2019
Mhm.
took a Clippers
We
team
give
whose
him
best
credit for that.
No, in 2018 took
Yes.
a Clippers team with the best player
Yep.
being Lou Will and
Mhm.
Montrezl Harrell to the
Yes.
playoffs, and they won 2 games
Watch this.
against
No, watch
Golden
this.
State.
Because we give him credit for that, and then the next year he blew a lead.
But
He
here's-
blew a 3-1 lead in the bubble.
And
Literally,
every
the
player,
next
every
year.
plaer was checked out of that series.
Yeah, he
Stop.
also.
I don't want to hear that excuse
had
anymore.
Montrezl Harrell
Kawhi
playing-
Leonard and
playing
Paul
in-
George played horrible.
He had
You can't be up
Montrezl Harrell
3-1,
playing
bro.
in crucial minutes and leaving him to die out there against the Joker. That was a Doc Rivers.
So let me.
team.
So I'm not.
Kawhi did not play horrible other than
I'm
Game
not
7.
exonerating Doc Rivers from any blame. I think there are times when he deserves blame. There are times when it's a bit too critical. Against us this year with the Sixers, 2023,
No, we said it wasn't his fault.
Game 7 wasn't his fault
No.
that Harden and Embiid did not show
No,
up.
we
2021, when the Sixers had a lead on the Atlanta Hawks, is it his fault that Embiid failed to show up fourth quarter after fourth quarter?
How about game 1 when he put Danny Green on fucking Trae Young? Watch him get cooked by 40, opposed to putting Ben
He
Simmons
also
on.
put Ben Simmons on Trae Young later on in the series, and Ben Simmons did
After
nothing.
they lost
Ben Simmons
game 1
passed
at
up a
home.
layup on Trae Young.
Here's the issue.
He
Doc
put
Rivers
Ben
isn't
Simmons.
actually
He put
coach.
he put Ben
He's not a
Simmons
coach.
and
Have you
Thibault.
listened
He
to
put
any of
Ben
his
Simmons
former
and Thibault on
players?
Trae Young.
Rasheed Wallace, deadass says he makes no adjustments. He would tell us one thing in the huddle.
Every player
we'd
has
leave the huddle and
complaints.
say fuck that shit, and then we'd actually start to talk after the huddle.
Have you ever heard
Listen
him
to
in the
Blake
thing
Griffin.
in the
Blake
in the
Griffin
huddle?
in the press conference this year goes,
It's a whole
"Hey,
bunch
look,
of nothing. It's funny.
The 76ers made no adjustments. That's not atypical of Doc. He's not actually a coach. He's just saying shit out there. Nick Nurse has been
respect
one
it.
of the best coaches in the league, and you can't look at that guy for not winning a championship or going to the Eastern Conference Finals when Pascal is his best player.
And the Fred is
they
the
They just
second
missed the
best.
playoffs this past year.
He went 41-41. That was a down year.
That's mid as hell.
Look at
That's
their
what
team.
Nick Nurse is.
You thought they were going to do that though with
They're
this team. They're
Of course, we all knew he was going to
because
do
of the
that.
talent,
That's
not of Nick
not
Nurse.
good.
He's missed the
Can I please
playoffs
go?
twice in 5 seasons. He got
Can I
gifted
please
Kawhi
go?
Leonard.
No,
He
because
got
Can I
gifted.
please
He got
talk? Because you're
gifted
making
Kawhi
a
Leonard.
terrible
They
point.
didn't play a home
You're
game that
making
year.
bad
He got gifted
points.
Kawhi Leonard. He got gifted Kawhi
really
Leonard.
blame him because
So, Joel, you're talking out of your ass.
Excuse me, Drew, you were talking out your ass a lot about the Toronto Raptors this whole year.
I was saying,
okay. So,
all right, so can I talk because you've talked a lot? Can I talk? I haven't talked.
Let me ask
you
you a question.
Talk? You haven't talked. I haven't talked because
what is
all you're
Nick
doing
Nurse
is
going
this.
to do for Philadelphia? What is Nick Nurse doing for Philadelphia? Answer me that question, Drew. What does Nick Nurse do for Philadelphia?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to go on my monologue because that's what I want to do because you've failed to let me do so. Because you've done a lot of talking and it's been out of your ass.
He's not doing nothing with Philly.
Because
he's doing
what
nothing.
You said,
he's doing nothing.
Is that he's developed nothing.
He's
in
doing
Toronto.
nothing in Philadelphia.
Siakam,
in the exact
OG Anunoby, Fred Van Vliet.
OG was a good player out of college.
Okay,
he fell in the draft because of an injury.
He's only progressed. And again, you like to mention that he's missed the playoffs 2 out of the 5 years. The 1 year was the COVID year when they had no home games. Use context. Right? Your favorite word. You failed to do so. This year, they missed it absolutely. They went 41-41. They underachieved for what I thought they would be. But again, let's look to last year when they were the 5th seed with essentially the same roster. They made a couple of tweaks. They added Otto Porter, who didn't end up doing anything for them this year. They were a starting 5-oriented squad last season. That was the top 5 seed. They tried to do the same thing again this year. It did not work because Fred Van Vliet was not the Fred Van Vliet that was the year before. Use context. That's all I'm asking you to do.
Was Fred VanVleet not the same player? Or was he asked to play a different role because their rookie that was heralded last year failed to improve this season, and they gave him a bigger workload to begin the year?
Correct.
So Fred VanVleet was the same player in a different role.
Disagree. For the fact that what you were expecting Scotty to do is improve, he didn't. That's on him, right? And if you want to partly blame Nick Nurse to benefit your argument in whatever way, I'm fine with that, sure. But realistically, what you look for with Nick Nurse is just to instill something new to this team, because what you've done the past 2 seasons clearly hasn't worked. Pick and rolls, nonstop, have Joel Embiid, isolation basketball, try to get to the foul line. You need to do something different with Joel, maximize his talents. I believe Nick Nurse can do that better than Doc Rivers. John was making a lot of points. What does Doc Rivers really do? What does he really do? And you're saying that he got gifted Kawhi Leonard. What do you want him to? I'm not saying that Doc Rivers is a bad coach per se. I'm not saying that. But when you make this a Nick Nurse versus a Doc Rivers trying to somehow minimize Nick Nurse's 5 years with the Toronto Raptors, when with the Toronto Raptors, excuse me as I'm spitting, with the Toronto Raptors, he was able to win a championship, and you say he was gifted Kawhi Leonard he only had for 1 season, but in that 1 season, he still was able to reach the mountaintop.
The Raptors, before Kawhi, were consistently a 1st seed led by Dwayne Casey. What took them over the top was acquiring Kawhi Leonard and then Marc Gasol in the mid-season trade deadline.
So was Doc not gifted Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett?
Yeah, no doubt.
And he's been getting milked off that ring for 15
am I saying that Doc Rivers is not getting?
Then you're also exonerating the 3-1 blown lead in the bubble. Like what are you saying?
Of course, Doc Rivers is still living off his 09 championship ring. 08 championship ring. What I'm saying is that that's going to be Nick Nurse. That's how we're going to view Nick Nurse after the Sixers tenure. That's how exactly.
It's a preemptive take. It's a preemptive ass take.
Harden's not going to be there. Harden's not going to be there, and if your best player is not going to be in the playoffs,
he's not going to have a good roster. So once again, he's not going to have a good roster.
And also to your point about Fred VanVleet. Fred VanVleet literally went on JJ's podcast this season and complained about his role and said, I'm the same player I was as last season. I'm just not in the same role. So what you said is mute, because what Fred VanVleet said himself is that he's in a different role, and that's why the numbers were different. What my question to you is, what is Nurse doing with the Sixers? What is he doing with the Sixers?
What are they going to do with the Sixers? The roster's not going to be good enough to win a championship. Yeah. If Embiid, who consistently does not show up in the playoffs, continues to not show up in the playoffs, what can Nick Nurse do?
And to the point that Shu made about Joel Embiid, he has to be more than just pick and roll. Joel Embiid for the last 2 seasons led the NBA in scoring. He won a scoring title. He's been in the MVP race. I'm not talking about the playoffs.
That's the only thing that matters.
Bro. Doc Rivers with Joel Embiid. Embiid has been in the MVP conversation 3 years in a row. He won the MVP this past season. We're not going to act like the offensive system that was not put in place in Philadelphia has not helped Embiid. It certainly helped Embiid elevate his game. In the regular season, of course, But in the playoffs, why does Embiid underperform? It's partly because he gasses out in the fourth quarter, but a big reason is because he has not had a healthy postseason since he's been in Philadelphia. So we're not going to act like his drop-off in the regular season to the postseason is because of a Doc Rivers offensive scheme thing. No. It's because he gets injured and he gets gassed later in the season. That's not a Doc problem.
Nick Nurse is going
to inherit the same damn thing when he gets to Philly.
Does Doc adjust?
I don't think he adjusts.
Is that a Doc problem?
But also,
B problem or a Doc problem?
Riff. Did Doc adjust in Game 7 when he threw 11 different defensive coverages against Jason Tatum?
You're trying to sit here and give praise because Doc adjusted one time in 15 years. You're not gonna get that out of me, bro.
He definitely adjusted more times than just once.
Come on,
it's just
bro.
It's just like
why are you trying to like save face? Why are you trying to save him?
Save who? Doc Rivers?
Yeah.
I can give a damn about saving Doc Rivers. I'm just saying, Nick Nurse.
Who did you want them to hire?
Nick, I would have loved some new fresh blood in there. I would have loved the Sam Cassell.
Would that have changed the ceiling of this team? Would that make Embiid healthy in the playoffs?
I don't think Nick Nurse is a great head coach, and I think that he's going to get exposed with the Sixers when he takes over. Everybody's happy about this hiring. He's not. We're going to view Nick Nurse in a similar light to Doc Rivers in the fact that you're still getting jobs off of your one championship run.
Let me tell you something. It's going to be
a second head coaching stint.
And the Raptors had Kawhi Leonard in one of the better teams with
how
amazing depth.
Kawhi is talking about Kawhi like Doc did not have him, like Doc did not have Harden. And
very briefly. In 5 years, how many times has Nick Nurse had a championship level team? In 5 years, how many times? One, right?
Once.
In 14 to 13 years, how many times has Doc Rivers had a championship level team?
Shit, a lot, half.
How many times?
I just need.
How many times were they injured going into the playoffs?
Why can I never just get it? The Raptors are always injured going into the playoffs.
Kawhi Leonard left Toronto, and they had a better regular season. They were then 5 points away from the conference finals without Kawhi Leonard, and they actually went as far in the playoffs as Kawhi did in Los Angeles with Doc Rivers when their best player was Pascal Siakam in 2020.
And one team actually choked.
And like Drew talked about in 2021, they were a 30-win team getting booed at home by Tampa Bay fans. Of course, you're not going to have a great season. They were playing 82 away games.
The Sixers.
And then the next year, he wins nearly 50 games, and he almost comes back from a 3-0 deficit, taking the 76ers to 7 games with Doc Rivers.
The Sixers in 2021 were the first seed in the Eastern Conference. The second best player was Ben Simmons, who we know is one of the biggest playoff drop-offs in ever. Versus the Hawks, how many points away were they from making an ECF? So you wanted to add that to make it arguably better. He was a couple points away from the ECF too, Game 7 versus the Hawks, but
with Joel Embiid.
Joel Embiid, who didn't show up in the fourth quarter.
Bro.
Ben Simmons is your second best player. Steph Curry was the second best player in that series. He averaged the most points. He averaged 17 a game. Let's not act like the Sixers, their own players, have had their mishaps, which has led to Doc Rivers not going as far. I'm not saying Doc Rivers is this phenomenal head coach, but to act like Nick Nurse is this outstanding upgrade, I'm not buying it.
You're losing me because you're acting like there would have been someone else out there Philly could have hired that we would have looked at and been like, okay, well this could go to the ECF, this could go to the finals. Like, no matter what coach they would have hired, we're going to have the same questions going into next season, and it's on the players.
I already said I'm a big advocate of new ideas.
But how does that keep Embiid
is fresh
healthy?
blood keeping Harden now?
How does that
Harden's not going to stay regardless?
So then
Nick Nurse.
Even if you don't like the Nick Nurse hire, even if you wanted fresh blood,
Mike D'Antoni would have been a better coach.
Even if you wanted fresh blood, that fresh blood was going to be put with a roster that wasn't as talented as Doc Rivers. So you were going to look at them the same way, even with Nick Nurse.
If Mike D'Antoni gets hired, James Harden stays.
Okay, but he won't.
D'Antoni's not new blood.
He wasn't even.
But D'Antoni's one of the greatest offensive minds we've seen this league's ever seen.
You just said you wanted new blood.
Of course, but Mike D'Antoni
wouldn't be better.
Helps the offense tremendously.
I 100% agree. Mike D'Antoni's a better coach than both of them. I'm with you on that. But you just said I wanted fresh blood. But then when you brought up Mike D'Antoni just to keep James Harden, now it's like I would have loved Mike D'Antoni. You wanted fresh blood.
So question. What are the Sixers going to do?
The same thing that they've done every single year.
So if they do the same thing every single, they lose in the second round. That means it wasn't an upgrade.
But none of us said Nick Nurse was a major
No.
upgrade. You didn't even let us say
Hell,
that.
we didn't have
you
a
just went
take.
on a spiel about Nick
No,
Nurse
I just
and
said
how
that
him and Doc are going to be looked at in the same view.
They
That's
will.
what
Nick
we've been
Nurse is
talking
gonna
about
be
this whole
living
time.
off that
You're
2019
comparing
championship for
you're comparing
years.
5
For
years
years.
of what a guy has
For
done
years with
to
no
13
real
years of a
playoff
guy
success.
he's milking
Years.
a super team ring. And you are comparing what he's done in 12 to
Was
13
that really a
years
super team?
and blowing leads for
ring.
multiple
Rajon
years to
Rondo
Nick
is the fourth
Nurse, bro.
best player.
That's a terrible analogy. Terrible. Nick Nurse has never blown a lead in his life. He has never blown a 3-1 lead. Doc has done that
Because he's missed the
multiple
playoffs
times.
half the time. He's been a
missed the
coach.
playoffs twice. He made it 3. He
Enough.
won a ring once.
That's
Enough,
almost half. That's
Terrell.
40%.
Enough.
That's 40%.
And one
That's
time they were
almost half.
playing in Tampa.
That's only
Who
10%
plays in
off of
Tampa?
50%.
What
That's
basketball team
almost
plays in
half.
Tampa?
That's almost half.
Bro,
you still
he's
had a
not.
good
He played
roster.
82.
You still had a good roster.
They played 82
You still
road
had a good
games.
roster.
Wow.
They played
How,
80.
as a fifth seed, how do you
They're
go
from
down?
Canada.
from-
They played
from
82
a fifth-
road games in America.
As a fifth seed, how do you go down 0-3 to the Sixers, who Embiid was injured his goddamn nose and Harden was a shell of himself? How do you go down 0-3
And then what
in
did they
first
do after
place?
that? They bounced back. They got a top
And
5
they
seed.
lost.
And they lost.
Who's had more disappointing moments, Doc Rivers or Nick Nurse?
Obviously, Doc Rivers has more of a career to have more
Okay,
disappointing
that's
moments.
why
But they both got the
that's-
same amount of rings.
Yeah, you can't look at Nick Nurse, who's only coached 5 years, and be like,
How
well,
many-
he's missed the playoffs 2 times. Like,
How many
he's coached 5 years.
coaches in NBA history have a championship in the first place? To have a championship in the first place, you're
Oh
an
my
exclusive company. You
God,
didn't have a
I'm gonna
championship.
throw
How
up.
many
realized he
coaches
was
win a ring
coaching-
and then is still coaching 15
Frank
years
Vogel.
later?
Frank Vogel has a
Ray
championship.
Allen, Rajon Rondo, Eddie House, Kendrick Perkins. That's one of the best teams of all time. Tony
Nick
Allen
Nurse
was
had
seventh man.
Kawhi Leonard, who was a
Here we
top 3
go.
player in the league at that time. He had Kyle Lowry, who's going to be a Hall of Famer. You have Pascal Siakam, who was most improved player that year. Danny Green is one of the better 3-and-D players in the league. Serge Ibaka was a great role player. Marcus Gasol was still one of the better defensive centers in the league at that time. Norman Powell was a great role player. Fred VanVleet was also a great role player. That team was stacked.
What was the year where they had to play 82 games? It was 2020, 2021.
2021 was
Yeah,
72.
so he didn't add the context. I'm glad I looked it up. So the only player to play 60-plus games was Chris Boucher and Stanley Johnson. After that, Pascal played 50. Baines played 50. Van Vliet played 50. Kyle Lowry only played 40 games. OG 40. Norman Powell 40. Terrence Davis 30 games. This team was Gary Trent only played 17 games. This team was banged up that year that they played 82 road games. So you was over there bombing them about not making the playoffs when they were
They wouldn't have made the
injured
playoffs
and they
anyway.
didn't have a home. They didn't have a home team.
They would have made the playoffs anyway. It didn't matter.
I mean,
it really
they
didn't matter.
Fucking half their line, their whole
didn't
line
matter.
played half the games.
And
Stanley Johnson played the most games.
yeah, like that's ugly.
And I'm not going to admit I'm wrong for something that's going to be right in hindsight. I'm going to be right about this 100%.
I think we're
You
all know
guys, you guys are all going to be wrong.
No, none of us are, or any of us saying the Sixers are going to the
No,
finals or the
we never
ECF.
know.
So if they don't do that, if
Nick
Nick Nurse, what is underachieving for the Sixers with Nick Nurse? If they don't make the finals of the conference finals, it's an underachievement, bro. I'm not going to give them a second round out. If you don't make the conference finals or the finals with the league MVP, you underachieved.
That's what Doc.
Wait, so Doc's done it, right?
Yes,
Okay.
he underachieved in Philly. There's no doubt.
now
I'm not saying Doc did not fail in Philly. He failed in Philly. But if Nick
He's
Nurse
failed everywhere
if
except
Nick-
Boston.
if Nick
Actually,
Nurse-
he underachieved in
if
Boston.
Nick Nurse doesn't get past the second round
almost went
in
back to back.
Philadelphia, he's Doc
almost went back to
Rivers
back.
with a better name.
Unfortunately, no.
That's all he
Kobe.
is. That's all he is.
So wait, where
if he doesn't make the conference finals, he's
Okay.
Doc Rivers with a better name.
So Nick Nurse, you're saying underachieved in Toronto?
no, you won a championship.
Okay, so he achieved in Toronto.
He achieved in Toronto.
Where has Doc Rivers achieved that?
Boston? He
When
won
he
a championship.
underachieved, he only won one ring.
He won.
That team was
That's
supposed to
still a
win
championship.
multiple.
How many
That's
teams-
an underachievement.
how many
Wait,
teams
hold on. Stop.
don't
I
win a
got him.
championship?
I got him. What do we say about the Los Angeles Lakers with Anthony Davis and LeBron? We say they underachieved, right? They got that one ring, but we always say what? They underachieved because they could have won one. Right? They could have won more than one. That's the same thing with that Boston team that had Rondo, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, KG. They should have won more than one. Yes, they got the ring, but they underachieved. He won a ring with Kawhi, and then Kawhi left, and he still achieved with that roster. There's not many coaches that can do anything with those rosters. They paid Otto Porter, he didn't play. He was supposed to be an important bench piece, and he did not play all year, bro. He had Malachi Flynn. What do you want that man to do?
Of course, the Lakers, you can say they underachieved, but ultimately the tenure is a success because they won a championship. You can argue that the Celtics underachieved, but in 2008 they win a championship. In 2009, what happened? Please use context because when they faced the Orlando Magic in the second round, Kevin Garnett was injured. That's a big part as to why they didn't repeat that year.
But you wasn't going to add context to Toronto, but now you want me to add context with Boston.
That's a reason why it's losing Kevin Garnett not a huge thing.
I'm with you, but did they underachieve?
So, okay.
Did they
and
underachieve?
Also, when we talk
He
about
hasn't
Boston,
answered a
Boston,
question.
we love to act like with Boston that they were a team that wasn't already on the decline as a group. They were all aging when they went there. What are we talking about?
They were still in the prime.
But wait. So has Nick Nurse's group not peaked? Like, did we think Pascal was?
They're all supposed to get better.
What the hell? You don't believe that?
Are they not? Is Pascal not supposed to be a better player than he was last season? Is he not supposed to? Is OG not supposed to keep on improving?
You just told
Was Scotty Barnes not supposed to keep on improving?
Scotty's probably the one
Was
guy.
Gary Trent not supposed to keep on improving?
You don't even think he's that good.
These was all young players, though, bro. These were all young players.
We're talking about right now. Like last year, Pascal's like 28, bro.
Yes,
he's in his prime. He's not gonna get really. This is him, bro.
This is Pascal.
OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, and Gary Trent should have all kept improving, even if the improvement was minimal. We're talking about a team. We're talking about the team in the Raptors who they have Fred VanVleet, who they had on the market for all year long. OG Anunoby, who every team wants to trade for. Apparently, they didn't get the best out of him this past season. What are you talking about, bro? Scotty Barnes took a huge. No,
Scotty's the one. Yes,
Scotty he regressed from his rookie year to his second year.
Scotty is the one. I'm with you. He should have improved.
I'm not giving Nick Nurse that pass, bro. This year was not a success.
Nobody has said it.
And ultimately, even if you underachieve, if you win a championship, you were successful. The Miami Heat should have won more championships.
So Nick Nurse is successful and Doc isn't.
When did I say Nick Nurse wasn't successful in Toronto?
You're talking about him like he's the worst.
You just said he's 2 for 5 in terms of not making the playoffs.
But I never said he wasn't successful in Toronto. Riv asked, did I not say Nick Nurse? Did I not say Nick Nurse was successful?
You're holding 2 playoff misses over 1 championship ring because he missed the playoffs.
What are we talking about? I'm not holding it over him. I'm saying that in Philadelphia, he's not going to do anything.
I agree.
That's my whole point.
No coach is doing shit with this roster,
said Nick Nurse was a failure in Toronto.
Because of him or the roster?
It's gonna be.
That's the question.
80%.
Him or the
Why
roster?
can't it be both?
I'm asking.
It could be both.
Why you can't answer?
It could be both.
Is it going to be him or the roster?
It's going to be both.
Okay,
that's what it's going to be.
So it's going to be.
It's going to be both.
It's going to be because
with Doc Rivers. It was both too. It wasn't just him. It was both.
But he did not show up. Harden showed for 5 games.
We always hear and we said Doc Rivers wasn't the reason that they fucked up this year. We all said that. We said it was up to the MVP. So why that you just went on this spiel for 20 minutes about Nick Nurse when you just said the roster isn't going to be that good regardless? Doesn't make sense to me.